What if what a lot of people see as normal, generalized in relationships, is actually exceedingly fucked up? Allow me to explain. Somebody that is raised in a survival based childhood with fight, flight, freeze, fawn, a lack of healthy boundaries, a lack of individuation, and a lack of differentiation, the likelihood that they're going to attract relationships that are exceedingly fucked up and boundary violating is very high. It's not even a matter like that it's a likelihood. It's a matter that it's the reality. Whatever way a person is raised is the way that they're going to attract and the way that they're going to be attracted to as well. So say for instance you find yourself in a relationship with somebody who wants you to be a certain way. They expect you to be a certain way that maybe you don't feel authentic being. Well, let's look at it this way instead. Maybe you find yourself with somebody that you unknowingly, because you're unaware of it, and it's not good or bad or right or wrong, this is the education. Maybe you find yourself in a relationship with somebody that you do not know is actually violating your boundaries. And you only don't know it because you never learned about it, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. Here we are. But what you might not realize is that you were raised in a survival-based childhood of fight, flight, freeze, fawn by people that did not accept you for who you were. And because you learned that dynamic in childhood, that was normalized for you. Because you learned that boundary violations were just normal, it didn't really bother you. I mean, in childhood, it was painful because here are people that you're being raised by that are violating the fuck out of your boundaries, that are putting a fuck ton of pressure on you to perform how they want you to, what they expect from you. And it was just so normalized in childhood that you never really took the time to be like, what the fuck? And quite honestly, it is quite a what the fuck kind of matter because, see, the unfortunate thing about fucked up and unhealthy dynamics that become normalized is that when everyone around you reinforces you that what it is that you're experiencing is fucking normal, and you basically end up being gaslighted over and over again by all of these mirrors that are reinforcing a reality that's actually exceedingly fucked up. And I like that I just brought that metaphor into this. Imagine you are in a room. You ever go into like one of those like fun houses? You find them at like, festivals, carnivals and stuff. They have different things, but at one point you find yourself, and they can be very challenging to move through because you're like looking all around you and there are mirrors everywhere. Well, essentially, in people's lives, what can happen is they can find themselves surrounded by mirrors, reinforcements, that something or someone in their life is actually not a problem, even though it's not a matter. I mean, yeah, they're a problem because it's unhealthy. It's unhealthy and fucked up to be in a relationship with somebody that wants you to be someone else, that puts a fuck ton of pressure on you to perform in a way that you definitely don't want to, that has expectations of you that they never communicated to you and you never agreed to, while simultaneously you have all these people in your life that reinforce that it's totally normal, that there's nothing to worry about. It's sad. It's really fucking sad and fucked up because here is the person being gaslit by all these people into believing that, oh, it's totally normal. It's totally fine. It's not normal. It's not healthy. If you're in a relationship with somebody where you violate their boundaries, where you put pressure on them to perform a certain way that they did not agree to, or that you have expectations of them that they also did not agree to, a lot of people are actually in these types of relationships with other people. It's not healthy. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just not healthy. But the reason that you find yourself here in this type of a situation is likely because you were raised in survival, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, with a lack of healthy boundaries, a lack of individuation, and a lack of differentiation. If you had healthy boundaries, you would accept and love yourself as you were. You would also do the same for other people. If you were not raised with healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, and instead you were raised by people, maybe parents, that violated the fuck out of your boundaries and put a bunch of pressure and expectations on you that, quite honestly, in childhood, who the fuck is actually going to consent to that as a child? Who the fuck as a child even has the conscious sense of awareness of I hope that people understand where this is going, because what I'm trying to say is that children usually either got a healthy childhood where they were accepted for who they were. There was not a bunch of pressure and expectation. They were allowed the healthy boundary space to develop a healthy ego state, individuation, differentiation. In a survival-based childhood, the child was basically pressured into performance in a certain way that it could not consciously consent to. It couldn't. It wasn't asked if it wanted to do something. It was told that it was going to do something. And it was also told that if it didn't do something that it didn't want to do, that there were going to be severe consequences. Wow. Way to fuck up your child. Yeah, seriously, that's fucking fucked up. So then, bringing it out decades later into adulthood, where that person is now a full-grown adult, and they're putting themselves in relationships with people where they violate the fuck out of that person's boundaries. Look at the childhood. It's all shown there. It's all shown there. And so now, really the theme of this is when you come out of that unhealthy dynamic that maybe you previously put yourself in relationships, looking specifically at projecting. If you lack healthy boundaries, the likelihood that you're going to project your shit onto other people is very high. That's just the reality of it. What if you were to instead heal that dynamic within yourself? Because what you're putting out there is what you're creating in here. If you were raised in an unhealthy survival-based childhood with fight, flight, freeze, fawn, a lack of healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, the likelihood that you project your own inner fucked upness onto other people that you're in relationships with is very high. And do you understand what that means? That means that, say, for instance, if you feel like you are unworthy of being loved in a healthy way, you treat yourself as such. You also treat other people as such, meaning that to give them love, which it would be broken love, to give them love, the reality of the matter is that they would end up having to do things that maybe they don't even want to do, and quite honestly, probably that they don't want to do, in order for you to give them love. That was the dynamic that you learned in the fucked up childhood. So now you find yourself projecting all of these ideas. It started in your family. The fucked upness of the ego state started in your family. You learned all of these fucking boundary violations. You, in and of itself, you learned a fucked up superego. Oh, you should do this. Oh, you shouldn't do that. There is a foundational moral compass to things that you should and shouldn't do, things that are healthy and unhealthy. That is a reality. But controlling someone's personal self-expression the way that they choose to express themselves for themselves and to the world, especially when that self-expression is healthy and the way that they choose to express themselves is boundary violating. Oh, you shouldn't wear that. Oh, you shouldn't, I don't know, say that. You shouldn't do that. And let me make it very clear that a lot of people are very confused as to what is and what is not healthy. And what a lot of people try to control in other people is actually healthy behavior, healthy self-expression, simply because they're uncomfortable with it, simply because it goes against what they learned in childhood, because they received a fucked up superego. Oh, you shouldn't say that because it means this and it means that. Let's look at the reality that nothing in life actually has any inherent meaning other than the meaning that we give to it. When you dissolve meaning, you realize that there's not a whole lot of stuff there. Meaning is applied. Subconsciously, unconsciously, and consciously. That's the reality of it. Meaning is applied. So actually take into consideration that a lot of the issues that people have with things, and I'll say in this case specifically personal self-expression, has entirely to do with usually subconscious and unconscious meaning that has been created for stuff. If you were to become aware of the reality that the word fuck only has meaning because we gave it meaning, somebody at some point in time had an issue with it. Oh, you shouldn't say that. Why, Karen? Oh, because it means this, that, and the other. That's just the meaning that you created for it. You can dissolve all of it down to the reality that none of it actually has any meaning at all. And then isn't it wild that based on the meaning that we create for things, we can feel certain ways about it, and it can just even more fuck up a lot of shit as I choose to use these words to express what I see, what I believe, how I feel. When you have healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, and you don't project your own inner shit, your own inner fucked upness, no judgment to anyone, by the way, no shame, no guilt, just seeing everything for what it is. When you have healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation, and you don't project your own inner fucked upness onto other people, onto the world, and you just allow them to be as they are, you just allow them to be themselves, you accept them for who they are, your relationships fucking transform. But this might be triggering for a lot of people. Is it challenging for you to just accept people for as they are? That kind of sounded weird, for as they are. Is it challenging for you to accept people as they are? If so, why? Do you lack healthy boundaries? Do you lack a healthy sense of self that isn't unconsciously, subconsciously? You probably wouldn't be doing this consciously. Unconsciously, subconsciously trying to control and change other people because you don't feel comfortable with their level of self-expression. People's self-expression, I'm not sure I'd imagine in what case it would be unhealthy. I mean, self-expression is the way that you dress, the way that you talk, what you create, what you do. These are all forms of self-expression. These are all boundaried. When somebody comes along and violates those boundaries, oh, you shouldn't say that. Oh, you shouldn't do that. It's such a fucking killjoy. It really is. Nonetheless, to never involve yourself with somebody like that is absolutely important, because why would you involve yourself with somebody who regularly violates people's boundaries like that? When you stop projecting your shit onto other people and you become aware of, if you have it, this internal dialogue that has this like compulsive fucking drive It's probably unconscious. This compulsive fucking drive to feel like you need to control people, feel like you need to turn people into ways and things that they aren't. What a fascinating thing to become aware of. And also with that, what an amount of space you create for different potentials to happen in relationships. And let me make it very clear, if I didn't before, if you find yourself in relationships with people where you are regularly violating their boundaries of personal expression, which their boundaries are healthy, it's their choice, they can do what they want to, understand that that did not come from nowhere. The likelihood that as a result of that, you were raised in an unhealthy, fucked up childhood and survival with fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and a lack of healthy boundaries, individuation, and differentiation is very fucking high. It's very fucking high. That's the reality of it. But let me also say this. The extent to which you are with other people in relationships is, it starts somewhere. That's the way that you are with yourself. Do you feel an inability to accept yourself radically for who you are, for what you are, for the ways that you are? Do you feel an inability to love yourself? Do you feel like there's something about you that's just not right, and you feel the need to simultaneously control the external, control the world, control people out there? Oh, you shouldn't be doing it. Why? And let me make it very clear that it's simply healthy behavior. You just have a problem with it because you were taught black or white thinking that it is wrong, that whatever people are doing is wrong. Black or white thinking. It's either this or that. And it has to be that, so it can't be this, so I have to change this in order to make it that, because unless I do, I won't feel comfortable just allowing people to be themselves because I am boundary violating. Because that was normalized for me in a fucked up childhood where my boundaries were violated. I'm not talking about me, I'm just utilizing this as an example to help people understand what's going on here. As within, so without. If you feel the need to control a bunch of fucking things out there, control people, violate people's boundaries, control how they express themselves, you're dealing with that internally. You were raised by people that did not accept you. You were raised by people that violated your boundaries. You were raised in fight, flight, freeze, fawn. You were raised by people that taught you that as you were not acceptable. You were not validated. You were not loved. And you learned to, and it was fucking uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable and it was painful. It was not fun, which then came with all of the defense mechanisms. But you learned to push yourself out. You learned to push parts of yourself that were actually authentic for you, but your family did not accept. Your parents did not accept. You learned to push that stuff out. This is shadow work. This is integration. So imagine you find yourself in relationships with people where you feel the need to, and you might not even be aware of it. The likelihood that you are aware of it is very fucking low, because I believe that if you were aware of it, you wouldn't be doing it. But you find yourself in relationships with people where you are projecting your own shit onto them. Your relationships would drastically change if you stopped doing that. You probably also wouldn't find yourself in relationships with the same people, because it's a like attracts like dynamic. You attract people that allow you to violate their boundaries because they also simultaneously violate your boundaries. It's the way that it works. And just, isn't it so fascinating how, like, we learned these dynamics, or a person learned these dynamics in childhood, and then they were raised in a society that equally presented these same dynamics. This is how this is supposed to be. X, Y, and Z. And it checks off all across the board. It's supposed to be this way, not that way. Subject A looks like this. If it doesn't, then it's not subject A. What about the intricacies of life? What about the fine detail of life? Black or white dynamics consist of like no detail. It's way too simplified. You're either this or you're this. Listen, life is far more complex than that. People are far more complex than that. If you think that projecting your shit onto somebody else is the way, you will find many fucking roadblocks. And you can do what you want. You can project all you want, but your relationships are going to mirror that. That's the reality. So maybe you'd consider stepping outside of the room that you're surrounded by mirrors in that consistently reinforce, not only reinforce, but gaslight you into believing that it's all normal. Because it's not normal. And it's most definitely not fucking healthy.